My name is Lily, and I'm 14. When you're 14, you're supposed to worry about school, friends, and maybe what you'll wear tomorrow. You're not supposed to worry about taking care of a house, or your 8-year-old brother, or a baby sister who doesn't even know what's happened. But that's where I am now. Mom's gone. They say it was an accident, but that doesn't really matter, does it? Gone is gone. Dad's here, but not really. He sits in his chair, staring at nothing, barely noticing when Alex cries or when Emily won't stop screaming. And I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces, the one who has to keep it together, because if I don't, who will? It started small, the strange things. The first time I was in the kitchen, trying to make dinner. Emily was crying in her high chair, and I was on the edge of tears myself, trying to get the stupid pasta to boil. And then, out of nowhere, the stove turned off. Just like that. I didn't touch anything, it just turned off. I wanted to believe it was just a glitch, but when I looked over at Emily, she wasn't crying anymore. She was staring past me, her little eyes wide and focused on something behind me. I turned, but there was nothing there. Just empty space, but the room felt cold, colder than it should have. At first I thought it was Mom. I wanted it to be her, watching over us, helping in whatever way she could. But things got worse. Nights were the hardest. Alex had nightmares, waking up screaming for Mom, and I would sit by his bed trying to comfort him. But sometimes I would hear something whispers, soft but clear, coming from the walls. They sounded like Mom, but not quite. There was something wrong with them, something that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. One night, after I finally got Alex to sleep, I went to check on Emily. Her room was dark, the only light coming from the moon outside. But as I stepped in, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, by her crib, was a shadow. It was shaped like a person like Mom, but it was wrong. Too tall, too thin, like someone had stretched her out. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The shadow didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel it watching me. It felt like ice on my skin, freezing me in place. And then, it leaned over the crib like it was looking at Emily. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything but watch. Finally, it faded, disappearing into the darkness, and the room warmed up again. Emily was still asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The whispers got louder after that, and the shadow started appearing more often. Every night it would be there, standing by the crib, watching Emily, and every night I would stand in the doorway, too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. I tried to tell Dad, but he wouldn't listen. He just stared at me with those empty eyes and told me I was imagining things. But I knew I wasn't. I knew what I saw, what I felt, and I knew it was getting worse. One night I woke up to the sound of Emily crying. I rushed to her room, and there it was again, the shadow, leaning over the crib. But this time it was different. This time it turned to look at me, and I saw its face. It was Mom, or at least it looked like her. But her eyes were hollow, her skin pale and lifeless. She didn't speak, but I could feel her anger, her desperation. She wanted Emily. I don't know why, but I could feel it in my bones. I stepped forward, trying to reach for Emily, but the shadow blocked me. The air in the room turned icy, and I felt a cold hand on my arm, gripping me so tightly it hurt. I tried to pull away, but the grip only tightened. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face, as I begged her to stop, to leave Emily alone. But she didn't listen. Instead, she reached into the crib and lifted Emily out, cradling her in those cold, dead arms. Emily stopped crying, her tiny body limp, and for a moment I thought she was gone. But then, as suddenly as she had appeared, Mom let go. Emily fell back into the crib, and the shadow disappeared, leaving me alone in the freezing room, gasping for breath. I rushed to Emily, checking her over, terrified that something was wrong. But she was fine, still breathing, still warm. But I wasn't. I felt like something had been taken from me, like a part of me had died in that room. The house is quiet now. The whispers have stopped, the shadows are gone, but the emptiness remains. I can't sleep, can't eat, can't do anything but sit by Emily's crib, waiting for Mom to come back. I know she will. She won't stop. She won't leave us alone until she gets what she wants. And I'm scared, so scared, because I don't know how to fight her. I don't know how to protect my brother and sister from her. I just know that I have to, even if it means losing myself in the process.
My parents told me their version of this story many years after it happened. So, my little brother Scott was born with a serious problem with his heart and died just a few months before his 3rd birthday, and being only 5 at the time, I didn't understand the concept or finality of death or dying, so when me and my older brother, Patrick, started saying our parents how we'd been playing our Saga Mega Drive with Scott at night when he was wearing his new wings and asked when we would get ours and learn to fly, and when we could play with him during the daytime, we couldn't understand why they were so upset with us. It wasn't until a few months had passed that they began to believe we weren't making it up. I should mention that my parents didn't, and my mum still doesn't believe in ghosts even after this. My mum had been woken up one night in the middle of the night to the sound of children giggling and was about to scold us and send us to bed when she saw that Maya and Patrick were both staring in the same direction, looking and talking to something and laughing. But the only thing she could see was the controller floating in the air, inches away from both of us. As if someone was trying to hold and use it, she sneaked back into her bedroom and woke my father, so that she had a witness to this event, and apparently both managed to stifle their screams for a few minutes, just watching us before my father coughed and alerted us and we were sent to bed. But to this day, me and my brother have the same memory. We sneaked out of bed one night to play our favorite game, Mario Brothers. When Scott knocked on the window to be let in and play with us, my brother opened the window and we laughed as he showed of his new wings and showed us that he could fly around the room. We then did what we always did and tried to teach him how to hold the controller and what buttons to press. We did this at least 4 or 5 times until the night my parents saw us, then never again. They freaked out and we moved house not long after.
I have never been a person who's kept many close relationships. It's never been my nature to let people into my life. I've always taken stock in being an observer, getting to know people from a distance. This trait is what led me to become so enmeshed in Monica's life. Monica Stevens and her husband Dylan were my neighbors and my landlords at my new apartment. I had just moved to the city from my small town mostly to find work, but it didn't hurt that there were many more people watching opportunities here than at my previous residence. My apartment was not lavish by any stretch, but it was perfect for me. I lived on the top floor, a view of the rooftop garden from my kitchen, and my bedroom window was directly across from the Stevens kitchen window, as they lived just 2 doors down. Although I'd tried, I could never get a view of their bedroom, as their thick, blackout curtains were shut tightly at all hours. For the first week after I moved in, I learned the Stevens routine. Each morning, Monica would already be at the kitchen table by the time I woke up at 6. She'd sit, her chin propped up against her palm, head buried in her book, and long blonde curls falling in front of her face. It was so cute. When Dylan got up, I could tell she stiffened at his presence. Immediately, he'd begin to berate her. I could see the spittle fly from his mouth as he slammed her book shut, grab his keys, and walk out the door. This was an almost daily occurrence. If he was not screaming in her face, he would sit across from her silently, eat a bowl of cereal, and disappear out the door. When he left, he would not come back again until dinner. I don't know what he would do during the day, but I never cared to find out. He was probably cheating on Monica, that pig. Plus, if I followed him, it would be less time I could spend with my beautiful girl. Hour after hour, Monica would sit at that kitchen table, unmoving. Poor thing was paralyzed with fear. I hadn't known her that long, but I knew I could never let her stay with this asshole. When Dylan got home, he'd walk in and pick her up from her chair and take her to the bedroom. I could hear his insincere apologies, just saying sorry in hopes he'd get laid. They come out an hour later, him placing her back into her wheelchair. I'd watch Monica sit with her back to my window while her doting husband cooked dinner. He cooked in seeming silence, not speaking to her or even acknowledging her presence. It baffled me how that troll could treat a woman of that caliber with such carelessness. Although I could never get a clear view of her face, I could tell she was beautiful, shy, and that he didn't love her like I did. He was so controlling. His wife never left the apartment complex, let alone feel safe enough to even move from the kitchen table during the day. The only time she could come out was Saturday morning. When would I see her on the rooftop garden? I knew she wanted me to save her. After observing their routine for around 2 weeks at that point, I could pinpoint exactly when I could corner Dylan. The morning I planned to confront him, there was a change in the usual routine. While Dylan was in the middle of his screaming session, he struck the back of Monica's head. This sent her forehead slamming down onto their wooden kitchen table. Let me tell you, this set me off. The rest of the routine remained unchanged, as at 7 a.m. exactly he would leave their apartment and head for the elevator. Following him, I left at 7:01 so I could catch the elevator right before it closed, wanting to seem nonchalant. I smiled when I walked into the elevator and introduced myself, stating that I was sorry for not formally introducing myself since moving in. I hadn't interacted with him directly when I had signed the lease, just his property manager. He gave me the side eye, so I confidently stuck out my hand to shake his. He grabbed it finally, his tarnished silver wedding ring cold on my hand, and said, "Yeah, I'm the landlord, Dylan." I told him I had noticed his wife's affinity for gardening and asked if she'd like some company next time. I know, a little early to get to talking about Monica, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't spend any more time exchanging pleasantries with this asshole either. That's when something strange happened. He turned to me and grabbed my forearm, squeezing so tight that it was painful. He shoved me forcibly against the elevator wall and said, "Listen, bitch. I know you've been stalking my wife. She wants you to leave her alone." The elevator door dinged and opened. He let go of my arm and walked straight out without another word. Straight through the complex doors to his car and drove off. I stood shocked. What the hell was that? But I had gotten what I came for, and that was all that mattered. That whole leave her alone was such an obvious lie. It confirmed to me that she needed my help. Dylan was becoming more unhinged by the day, and this episode in the elevator was proof. I went straight back up to my apartment, already thinking of what I was going to do on Saturday morning when she got to that garden. It was already Friday evening by the time Dylan got back from his daily escapades. I dreamed of her that night. About finally turning her around, seeing that gorgeous face that was no longer hiding from Dylan, professing my love and running away together. We'd get a cottage so she could garden but live near the city so we could people watch together. We'd both be free and happy. Saturday morning came, and I woke up early to prepare my things. When Dylan woke up, he went immediately to find Monica in the kitchen. He lit into her first thing. It was too muffled to hear exactly what he was saying, but loud enough that I could hear through their closed window. I could see her distress. She couldn't even lift her head to defend herself. This poor, beaten-down woman was counting on me. But it wasn't too much longer now. Dylan forcefully grabbed her wheelchair and wheeled her out of the apartment, heading for the roof. I watched as he dumped her there, screaming a final time, saying, "You can just rot out here. I don't even care anymore." Dylan disgusted me. I wished I could rush up there and take her away right then. However, I knew I had to wait for Dylan to depart if I wanted to avoid a confrontation. Half an hour later, I approached the elevator so that I could reach the rooftop garden. As the elevator rose, I took a deep breath. Was I going to do this? Confess my love to this married woman and propose that we run away from her abusive husband together? I guessed so, because a moment later I was stepping out from the elevator and into the small hallway that ended with the final obstacle between me and my love. As I approached the door that led on top the roof, I felt the hot summer air begin to seeping in. I turned the knob and stepped onto the bright roof. There she was, Monica. That silky blonde hair was instantly recognizable. It had fallen and covered her face slightly so that she couldn't quite see me approach. I walked over slowly as I didn't want to startle her, but then my emotions took over. I grabbed her shoulder, spun her around, and closed my eyes right before I professed my love. But I got no response. I mean, nothing. Not a screw you, not an I love you too. Silence. I opened my eyes, expecting to meet the eyes of a beautiful woman. Instead, I gagged. She had no eyes. They were gone. No eyebrows either. They were replaced with thick, black stitches that held her eyelids together. Her eyes were completely sewn shut. My eyes traveled down to her nose. She had a maggot hanging out of her right nostril, and it turned to crawl into her left one. She was a repulsing pale color with burst veins littering her skin. Then down to her mouth. It was sewn as well, and her lips were gone, ripped off her face. Her mouth was sewn into a line, no smile, no frown, completely straight and emotionless. Beyond that, her legs were completely gone. I was expecting her to have been intact. I mean, I knew she was in a wheelchair, but her legs looked like they had been sawed off. They were jaggedly rotting, not being cauterized of anything. I couldn't look anymore. I ran to the hallway leading back to the elevator, vomiting once I had gotten the door shut behind me. I ran to my apartment where I deadbolted the door behind me and sunk down into a fetal position, sobbing. I felt indescribable loss, anger and fear. What had he done to my beautiful future wife? He mutilated her, and he thought I was going to let him get away with this? I had no weapons beside a massive hammer from an old toolbox I had under my sink. I stalked my way to the Stevens apartment and broke the doorknob off with the hammer. Kicking the door in, I wanted to avenge my love. The apartment had an atmosphere so grotesque, so depraved, so much more disturbing than I could have ever imagined. I walked into the door and smelt rotting flesh seeping from the walls. The only light came from the singular kitchen window. The one I had stared into so many times, the one I had never imagined would hold this horror lurking in the spots I couldn't see. Right by the window, just out of the view I could see from my apartment, was a meat hook. And there in the dim apartment hung Monica's left leg. He was going to eat her leg. I nearly puked on the kitchen table. I couldn't bring myself to leave even though I was frightened. No matter how much my brain said to run, my feet kept taking me further into the apartment. I entered their bedroom. Dried blood splatter stained the walls and floors. It looked fairly faded. How long ago had he killed her? I knew it hadn't been long, but I believed that the whole time I had been living in this apartment, she had been dead. I gazed into my apartment window as I re-entered the kitchen, imagining how untainted my mind had been just hours ago. I began to panic. I wanted to call the police. I had impenetrable evidence against Dylan. Not only was Monica slumped over on the roof, but his apartment was a striking and completely incriminating crime scene. Before I attempted to get help, I knew I had to get Monica somewhere safe. I started my way out of the kitchen, making my way back to the front door. But then a voice rang out from just outside the front door. "What the hell?" Dylan yelled. He broke the routine. I had no chance of running. I ducked back into the bedroom and slid quietly into the attached bathroom. I could hear his thudding footsteps grow closer and closer as he threatened, "I have a gun. Whatever creep is in here, I have a gun." It was time for me to avenge Monica. I heard him enter the bedroom. I gripped the hammer in my hand, charged out of the bathroom, and swung. I hit him directly in the left temple. He screamed, contorting with pain. I dropped the hammer and fled back to my apartment, adrenaline carrying me the whole way there. All I could focus on was getting his blood off me. When the police searched the apartment, they were in shock at the scene. It wasn't me that called them, but another tenant down the hall. By the time I was finished washing myself and disposing of my bloodied clothes, Monica had been found by police. Coroners came and wrapped up her frail body. They lifted her up and she was gone. I didn't even get to say goodbye. 2 days later, I went to her closed casket funeral. It was a fairly publicized affair, being how brutally tortured she had been. I stood in the back and after the burial I left. My car packed with everything I owned, I left the city. I still dream of her, of dancing in the kitchen, of how our lives could have been, of her beautiful sewn face. Monica, you're going to love my new place. It's the cottage we've always wanted. I can't wait to pick you up soon. See you then.
I had no choice. I needed money right away. I couldn't qualify for a loan, and the damn insurance company said the treatment was not authorized under our policy. My work was barely paying over minimum wage, and I still needed almost 5 grand. The only way this would work is if I got another job working graveyard somewhere else, at least until I could save enough to get her the treatment. Danny was all I had left. I already lost her mother a year ago in that car crash. I couldn't lose her too. I looked high and low. I combed the classifieds and drove around desperately searching for a job that could pay what I needed and have an available night shift as well. The prospect seemed hopeless, but I had to find something soon. The town we lived in was small and the prospect seemed bleak. That was when, in a streak of what felt like luck at the time, I inquired about a job at a small grocery store about a mile away from where we live. It was called She's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. It was an odd little store that was closed during the day. It seemed to open at around 8 p.m. and close sometime before morning. The weird hours seemed off, and I didn't know who would want to shop at a store that was only open in the middle of the night when there were 24-hour chains elsewhere. Though it did not really matter, it was a store, I needed a job, and the unique hours in this case would work for the schedule I needed. I decided to try and apply for a job there. I was on my way home after finishing a shift at my day job. My friend Kathy was nice enough to watch Danny while I was working and had even agreed to do so if I found a graveyard shift somewhere else as well, at least for a month or two if needed. Since I had seen the odd shop and saw the hours, I decided to inquire about a job at the lonesome and odd little store that seemed to only be open at night. I was reluctant at first since I thought they might have some illicit reasons to only be open at such hours. Despite my misgivings, I realized it was the best hope I had of getting a job with my minimal skill set, and that was a guaranteed graveyard shift. I got out of my car and walked up to the entrance. The place was pretty run down, but seemed to still have signage up and around the front. There were sale signs and clearance items advertised, and the somewhat normal facade of a grocery store made me relax and continue with my intended course. I noticed up close there was a mark under the first part of the store named Shiz. It looked like Japanese kanji or something sai. I stepped inside and it seemed deceptively large compared to how small it looked on the outside. There were aisles of various groceries and other household supplies and even some clothes racks. I had no idea how it was this large in operation. Most of the shoppers seemed fairly normal at first, though there were some people who you could tell preferred to do their shopping at night. I tried not to stare as I received a rather murderous-looking glare from one such individual who I must have let my eyes linger on too long. The staff also looked about the same as any other store staff would look, fairly diverse and no one with an overly cheery or overly sullen mood about them. I did notice there was not a lot of talking near the checkouts. Moving on, I looked near the front, intent on finding a manager's office to inquire at. I felt hopeful when I saw a sign that I thought read "Help Wanted." I felt a bit confused and less optimistic when I read the full content of the rather strange sign stating, "Help Wanted." Help, but not always needed. I was not sure how to take that, so I decided to look for someone to ask. As I approached the back office and went to knock on the door, I was interrupted by a large man with a blue store apron and a name badge indicating he was store manager Benny. The large man welcomed me with a pleasant, though slightly forced, "Hello, can I help you find something today?" I was distracted by the almost pained expression on his face, like his smile would eventually shatter the muscles in his face if he kept it on for a moment longer. Brushing past the distraction, I remembered why I was there. Yes, I was actually looking to apply for a job here. I stated my earnest intent while gesturing to the help sign near the door. Benny stopped smiling and looked at the sign, and then looked as if he was about to say something when he held up a finger and pulled out a radio from his pocket. "Molly, what is the bagger situation today? How are we holding up staff-wise?" There was no immediate response. He smiled again in that disturbing way while he drummed his fingers along his tie as he awaited a response. His face wrinkled, and then he stated, "I am sorry, I think we might be full at the moment, but thanks for your interest." He was about to usher me away when his radio barked to life and I heard a static-laden voice on the line. I couldn't hear everything, but it sounded strange, and I thought I heard something like, "Rob ... caught? Problem? And bagger got bagged?" I didn't know what to make of the weird bits I heard, but before I could think twice about it, I heard Benny mumble, "All right, but next time answer faster. It could have been a code black, and if you mess around with those customers, it is your ass next." I was still standing there in awkward silence when he wheeled around and his frustrated veneer vanished, and he was back to the awful fake smile as he loudly proclaimed, "Congratulations, there is an opening available now. Let's get you set up. Can you start tonight?" Right now, as in tonight, I asked, thoroughly surprised they would want me to start immediately and without any application or vetting process to speak of. "Yes, right now, don't worry, we can sort out all the legal stuff later, but for tonight, we are actually a bit busier than normal, and we could use the help. First, though, let's talk terms and some mandatory paperwork." I was not sure what he meant, but I figured it might mean a salary negotiation. "Sure, what is the pay and benefits?" I knew it was a little tacky to ask up front, but I needed that money badly, and Donnie couldn't afford for me to get taken for a ride by someone lowballing my wages. $45 an hour is the pay for baggers, which is what we normally start people, as I almost gasped aloud. That was crazy for a grocery store bag boy. My surprise was apparent, and Benny held up a hand and cut off my next question, stating, "We value hard work and integrity here," and just a wee bit of discretion, he laughed aloud and slapped his knee. "But in all seriousness, there is a non-disclosure agreement we do need you to sign with the paperwork." He grinned again, and I thought the discretion bit and NDA was weird, but that was double what I was making at my day job, so I was overjoyed at the prospect. He continued, "Health coverage and dental are fully covered, but no life insurance. Those policies always have some trouble for some reason." His grin widened as he said the last part, and it looked even more fake than before. Despite some disturbing implications, I could scarcely hear the alarm bells in my head over my future payday. I had found a miracle I would be able to get enough money in about a month working here in my day job. I would be able to get Danny that treatment. I didn't need to be asked twice. I readily agreed to the offer. "Very good decision. Welcome to the Shy family. Ed, get out here and get our new hire an apron and a tag and start with the simple version of the bagger training." An unpleasant-looking older man emerged from the back room and was holding an apron and moving with an odd gait that might have indicated some previous injury or the like. I forced a smile and introduced myself, but the man, Ed, as I heard his name was, did not reciprocate. He looked me up and down and snorted derisively in a way that was hard not to take offense to. I let it go and waited for him to say something. Just before opening my mouth to ask when the training started, he cut me off and humorlessly asked, "You know baggin' feller?" "Baggin'?" "Like bagging groceries," I tried to clarify. He glared at me and just nodded his head. Well, yeah, I mean, I have a general idea. I never worked at a grocery store before, but I think I know how things should be bagged, generally speaking. He paused an uncomfortably long time, and I was about to try and speak again when he snorted and gave a rather unpleasant throaty laugh that ended in a dry coughing fit. After he finished, he said, "Not like this, I'm guessing. Yeah, you don't. All right, then, come on. I will show you how we do the bagging and also the other rules. Reckon you better listen close. I ain't for repeating myself." I nodded my head and we started towards the back room when I heard the radio on his belt come to life and a very nervous sounding voice on the other line say, "Code black, repeat code black." Ed's face wrinkled in a way that somehow made him look even more annoyed than usual. God damn it all, more of them fellers already. He turned and left, angrily shouting some imperceptible grunts and complaints into the walkie and left me near the back room dumbstruck and not sure of what to do next. What was a code black? Why was everyone afraid of him? I was about to go look for someone when I felt a hand on my shoulder and I wheeled around to see a woman. The tag on her shirt read Assistant Manager Molly. She smiled at me and it did seem more genuine than some of the others here. "I'm sorry we have not met. You must be the new hire. I'm Molly, the eye here. I can help you with training and orientation. You can be a great asset here at Cheese Issa." She held a hand toward the backroom doors and ushered me toward them. We moved into the backroom halls, and as I looked around, I saw several doors that looked like ice boxes. I figured they must store a lot of products to need that many freezers scattered about. Visible near the freezer's doors were shelves of other inventory. There were rows of boxes and pallets of strange things like chemicals, metalworking gear, various pieces of hardware, and crates that had gun manufacturers' names on them. I was wondering again just what kind of store this really was. Besides the odd inventory, it was also kind of a mess, and I was glad I wouldn't be the one having to sort all of it. We made our way to an office room with oppressively bright blue painted walls like a kindergarten classroom. The sight reminded me of when Donnie was in kindergarten, and I steeled my resolve against any difficulty this job might have. I needed to do this for her. The office was sparse. There was only a desk, some chairs, and a file cabinet. I did notice on the walls, painted on the bright blue, were some black characters that almost looked like calligraphy. More of those kanji were on the wall, and again, I wondered what they meant. Before I could guess, Molly was motioning to me. She gestured for me to sit down at one of the only two chairs, in this case, the one facing the desk. I sat down and she sat opposite me. She looked over a few pieces of paper she had on a clipboard and then smiled, turned around and started rummaging through a file cabinet. As I was waiting, a sudden shriek was heard outside and I looked to the door and suppressed a gasp. Molly didn't react and kept looking for something. I thought maybe she hadn't heard it and I was about to say something when she wheeled around with a large binder in hand and dropped it onto the desk with a loud crash. "Before training starts, please fill out this form for your safety and ours." She handed me a piece of paper that, when reading the details, seemed to be the non-disclosure agreement Benny had mentioned. I thought it was odd I had to sign this, but other hiring documents like tax, payroll, and healthcare paperwork were not required before starting. I considered they might be paying people under the table, which I hated to admit I might prefer since no tax deduction meant I could save money faster. I signed all too quickly without realizing what I was agreeing to keep quiet and what the consequences imposed were if I didn't. Molly took the paper, looked it over, and said, "Good, that is settled. Well, let's get started. This is the employee handbook. We only have one, so you are going to be doing some light reading for a bit. Because we need the manpower now, though, I will go through it with you quickly since Ed was indisposed." She grimaced when she said the last word and looked at her watch and then adjusted a dial on her walkie-talkie. She looked back at me and resumed. "As a bagger, you are vital in ensuring customers leave satisfied with their product, and you are one of the last people they will see on the way out, except in certain circumstances." She cleared her throat loudly in time to some muffled noise I thought I heard somewhere else in the back room. Basic rules and code of conduct are as follows. You are to bag products to the customer's satisfaction. The first thing you are to ask customers is what type of bags they want. Whatever they say goes as far as how to bag things and with what bags. You are not to ask about or discuss the purchases of the customers, no matter how curious you are or how talkative they might be. No questions, period. Understood. She slammed her fist on the binder and I jumped back startled as she looked at me. I stammered out a quick acknowledgement. Yes, understood. "Good," she said, and continued with the list. No assistance may be provided to customers for loading or unloading things from their vehicles. If a customer requests help to their vehicle, do not under any circumstances assist or leave the building with them or any customer at any time. Regardless of the story they give you as to why they need help, it is our policy and they know this. If requests persist or you are feeling intimidated or threatened, you are to press the yellow button at the end of each checkout by the bagging station. A security personnel will escort the offending customer to aisle 4 for processing and detainment. Wait, detainment? They don't just kick him out. I thought that was weird. She continued with the next rule before I could ask about it. The most important rule. Occasionally, there will be a special bag request. You will know it when you hear it. If ordered, press the black button by the end of the checkout and proceed with code BLACK protocol. These guests are normally our highest paying customers and often are here at the pleasure of Mr. Shy himself. They must be attended as quickly as possible. There was code BLACK again. What special bag was she talking about? Ignoring the look of concern spreading over my face, she continued. Cell phones, smartwatches, or quite literally anything that could be used as a recording device are strictly prohibited while on duty, both for our customers' sake and for our own. Store closes at 4 a.m. exactly. Any customers who remain will be escorted out, only exception being any customers who are involved in a code BLACK. No access is allowed to the basement and inventory back rooms, only managers and stock employees allowed. Simple, right? Any questions, she asked, while flashing another smile. Well, I did have a few questions about this. She cut me off mid-sentence, talking over me and saying, "Good, I knew you looked like a fast learner. Come on, let's get you out to the check stands." And bagging, she grabbed my shoulder surprisingly hard and pulled me out of the office and back into the store proper. I saw a few customers look at me getting pulled along, and I saw some snickers, and I felt a bit embarrassed. I was led to a checkout with a flickering 3 next to it. The other 2 were busy with customers waiting in line to be helped by a cashier and bagger a few feet away from where I would be standing. We stopped and Molly cleared her throat loudly to get the attention of a young man with dirty blonde hair and a rather unimpressed expression on his face. "Hello, Lee. This is our new bagger. Show him the ropes and try to be easy on him. It's his first day. I know it's busy, but we don't need another Rob situation so soon. Have fun, you two." She walked away without another word to the back room, and I was left there with Lee as I heard his name was staring at me. I tried to break the ice. "Hi, my name is." "Save it," he responded abruptly. "I don't want to get attached, just in case. I liked Rob, he was my friend, and now it's best not to talk about what happened to him. Just do your job and follow the rules, and you should be fine." I didn't know how to respond to the blunt introduction, but I figured he seemed nicer than that Ed guy, so I just walked up to the bagging station and gave him a mock salute and tried to put a smile on my face. It was going to be a long night. The first customer came through and Lee wordlessly scanned their items. I proceeded to grab a few nearby bags when I felt a sharp kick in my leg. Lee was glaring at me like I had just slapped his mother. "What?" I thought I was supposed to. Then I looked at the customer who was frowning at me and I remembered. "Hello, what type of bag would you like?" The customer, an older woman, sneered at me and finally accepted the question and said flatly, "Paper, please," and did her best to pretend I didn't exist while I was bagging her items, mostly groceries, produce, meat, and dairy. There were a few odd pieces, like a set of kitchen knives and what looked like boxes of some sort of firearm ammunition. I was about to ask about them when I remembered the rules. I tried to ignore it and just carry on. She left wordlessly, and more customers piled into our line. As the night went on, I started to see less normal items and more disturbing things. One customer had bought zip ties, large volumes of what looked like medical-grade sedatives, and several bags of candy. Another bought an ungodly amount of various weapons, ammunition, and several large fruits like watermelon and honeydew. I thought he might be just shooting some fruit for target practice until I saw what appeared to be a Kevlar vest and an uncomfortable amount of alcohol. After a dozen very disturbing customers came through, I finally found someone who seemed a bit friendly. She was a kindly old woman who seemed to enjoy speaking to me and by all accounts was very nice. It was a much-needed reprieve, and I actually enjoyed talking with her. Her name was Marge, and she was just buying some baking supplies, eggs, butter, flour, spices, all pretty normal things. "You simply must try my raspberry tart. It is divine. I will bring some by next time, or better yet, I think I still have some in my car. Won't you be a doll and help an old woman with her groceries?" I was about to accept when I saw Lee's face go blank, and he just shook his head. I looked back at Marge, and she had a wide grin on her face, and I looked down at the second half of her groceries yet to be bagged. There were containers of various chemicals, including rat poison, bleach, and ammonia. I tried to speak, but I froze, and she asked again. "Come on, dearie, my hip is in bad shape after my fall. It will only be a moment, and you can have a treat, and a nice tip as well." Her grin shifted in a way that made me very uncomfortable, and I struggled to speak, but finally blurted out, "No, thank you, Mom. Store policy. We are not to escort customers out of the store under any conditions." Her grin vanished and grimace of anger flared up briefly. "Oh, well, your loss, I suppose. I would have made it spectacular. I thought I might get one of the new ones before you figured it out. Next time, Sonny, I might just find where you live and make a house call." She winked at me and pushed her cart away, and I was shocked and horrified at the implications of what had just happened. Lee elbowed me in the side and gestured to the customer who had taken her place, and I was forced to just ignore another uncomfortable encounter that night. After a long shift of bagging goods for an assortment of disturbing individuals, I realized my work was done when a screeching PA system informed everyone in the store that It is now 4 a.m. and we are closing. If you have not purchased your items already, then you must leave. If you are loading goods, a reminder that no employees may leave with you. You must take them and leave. If you do not, they will be confiscated. Any customers lingering in store will be confiscated as well. Geez, they were not joking about the strict closing time. A large group of people I had not seen before moved through the aisles with flashlights and batons. They must have been the store security team. They seemed overkill and intense, more like paramilitary than grocery store security guards. They were looking for any stragglers, apparently. I thought just then of the weird announcement about people left behind being confiscated as well, and it seemed kind of concerning with how serious they were about everyone getting the hell out on time. I was ushered out as well, along with the other staff who left wordlessly. I tried to make a quip to Lee, asking if there was ever overtime, but he just kept his head down and ignored my joke. I did not know what kind of operation this was, but the more I learned about it, the more I felt like I made a mistake in taking the job. I had to keep it for a while longer, at least until I could save enough for Donnie's treatment. I worked at She's for a few more weeks of uncomfortable conversations and ghoulish and unspeakable items being bagged at the caprice of disturbing and malign customers. I saw 2 code blacks in that time, at least I should say I overheard them. Lee told me not to look and try to avoid the attention of the customers who ordered them. After the first one in my second week of work, I did not see Jay, the other bag boy, again. Lee warned me not to ask about him, and I was getting increasingly terrified of what would happen if I got one as well. What the hell were the code blacks? The only good news I had was that the store paid bi-weekly, and to my surprise, it seemed like almost no taxes were taken out of my paycheck. I had almost a full $2,800 from the first 2 weeks of work. A little more, and with a bit of the money I saved up from my other job, I could afford Danny's treatment. I just needed to make it 2 more weeks, and then I could quit and never see the awful place again. I managed to avoid any trouble for my 3rd week, but in my last week, I had a disastrous run-in with a customer. It was what started a sequence of events so horrible that the conclusion still threatens my family's safety and terrifies me to this day. It was about 11 p.m. and things were going okay. Some of the managers were poking around and there was an odd air of concern and anticipation in the air. Lee told me that the owner would be stopping by at some point that night, Mr. She himself. I was trying to ask more about the owner when a large bald man came to our checkout. He had horn-rimmed glasses and a large jolly face that was fixed in a leering stare that made me feel very uncomfortable. He tried to chat with me, but I got very bad vibes from the man. I tried to ignore him, but he kept pressing it. Ah, come on, man, lighten up. I see you are new here. What's it like working here? You see any real action? Mr. Response was simply asking, "What type of bag would you like, sir?" "I will show you my bag if you show me yours," he said, then let out a belly laugh that almost knocked his glasses off as he kept smiling at me with a sick gleam in his eyes. After a moment, he finally said, "Plastic's fine, I suppose," just trying to lighten the mood. "You look tense, like you could use a break." I ignored him while bagging copious amounts of junk food, a pair of pliers, lube, condoms, and various chemicals like bleach and OxyClean. I had become slightly inured to the worst of the colorful characters and the concerning wares they purchased, but this one seemed particularly loathsome. "Yeah, you could definitely use a break. Hey, I know I can give you a little pick-me-up in my car. I am right outside. Help me take this stuff out, and I'm your Huckleberry." I couldn't even formulate a response. I couldn't think over my skin crawling away to another zip code. I resolved to just fall back on the rulebook line and proceeded to inform him that we are not allowed to leave the store with customers for any reason. To my horror and disgust, this one did not let the matter go. "Ah, come on, you're just playing hard to get. Seriously, I'm sure I can pay you more than these people. Come on, what do you say? Come on out and we can talk about it." I repeated the rules again while bagging the last of his items, but he would not let it go. "Hey, listen to me, you little fuck. You think you are too good for me? You think you are some kind of hot shit? Huh? Well, you are coming outside now. No one ignores me like this. I have a special treat in store for stubborn pricks who don't listen to me." His face was bright red and he was practically spitting the words at me. I panicked at first, but then I remembered the button by the bagging station. I pressed it discreetly while trying to hold my ground, shrinking slightly back to the vile tirade of the deranged individual. I took a step back and he moved forward, looking like he was going to grab me. To my surprise, a large gloved hand fell on his shoulder. I looked behind him and a nearly 7-foot tall man clad in a weird cross between police riot gear and military-grade armor was holding him back. The customer turned around and started to yell at security. "Do you pricks know who the fuck I am? I know the owner. You will all be sorry you crossed me. I am going to," and a sickening crunch was heard, followed by the man going limp. The guard holstered a now bloodied security baton and bent down over the dazed form of the customer. His eyes were glazed and he likely had a concussion, but he was still conscious and tried to speak when the security guard seized him by the throat and hoisted him back to his feet. The customer tried to whimper out a soft and confused sounding, wait, before he was punched so hard in the chest. I thought I heard his ribs break from where I was standing. The helmeted face of the guard turned to me, looked me up and down, and asked, "What type of bag was he using?" I had no idea what that had to do with anything, but I answered, "Plastic, he was using plastic bags." I heard a chuckle under the mask and helmet of the guard, and he said, "Too bad he didn't pick paper," and the guard dumped out one of the man's bags. As he was trying to rise to his feet, the guard placed the plastic bag around the customer's head and tightened it. To my shock and horror, he proceeded to easily strangle him. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and after a few moments it was over. I was speechless, and another guard came over and they took the customer's body on a stretcher to the back room. Benny, the store manager, had appeared out of nowhere and spoke to us. "I am sorry you had to see that, but I am glad you are safe. We take threats very seriously here and know you all need to be safe in such dangerous times. That is why we keep this place safe. Safe from dangerous people like that. I trust what happened here will also be safe and secure with you, right? After all, we wouldn't want you endangered by anyone like that knowing where you live, right?" He smiled at us and left to the back rooms. I understood the veiled threat and realized I would not be able to tell any real authorities or report on this madhouse. Despite that encounter, my night was not done yet, and the worst was yet to come. Lee would not speak to me about what we both saw, and we tried to move on with the night and pretend what we saw happen didn't happen. It was getting close to 4 a.m., and we would be able to close soon. I was so close to being done with this place and getting out of there and home to my little girl. I just needed to hang on for a couple more days. There were only a few more customers lining up at the checkouts when something odd happened. A well-dressed man went to check out too, and they shut off their light and said the scanner was not working anymore. It seemed fishy since it had been fine all night, but when the guarded looks and concerned faces flashed before me and then back at the well-dressed man, I realized that they might know something I didn't. My heart sank as I realized he might be one of those special customers. I looked over at Lee, and he was visibly sweating and fumbling with the cash register. The man sauntered over to out-checkout. He had a small basket with what looked like fine sewing thread, thimbles, and tailoring articles. It also contained a hacksaw, a plaster cast, and several boxes of nails and rivets that seemed to clash with the sewing equipment. By itself, I did not think anything of it, and I relaxed a bit. Lee was pale and wordlessly scanned the small items he had. After they came down the conveyor, the man turned to me, tipped his hat, and introduced himself. "Good evening, my friend. My name is Henry Jaspin. I work for a little antique cloth shop, and I am here to get some materials." I relaxed a bit more. This did not seem too strange. I proceeded to ask, "What type of bags would you like today, mister?" Jaspin: "Well, my good fellow, I should think paper for the small bits you see here. Indeed, I found all the tailoring kit I need to make work anyone would be proud of. But what I really need today are some raw materials, so the bag I really need will be a body bag tonight, preferably the larger variety." My mind was racing, my heart was pounding. Did he just say he needed a body bag? I was about to ask him to repeat it when it dawned on me. The rules had said, "A special bag request. You will know it when you hear it." I realized I had just encountered my first code black. I forced my trembling body to move, and I pressed the black button under the bagging station. I heard an alert on nearby walkie-talkies. Code black on number 3 confirmations were heard all around. There was a burst of motion near the back, and I handed Mr. Jaspin his bag of smaller merchandise as Benny approached us. "Good evening, Mr. Jaspin," he managed to choke out the words, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "Oh, Benny, don't worry. I know what I asked for, and though you are a big fella, I wouldn't dream of picking you. We go too far back. Besides, your skin is terrible. Can you imagine one of our suits on you?" Mr. Jaspin let out a howl of laughter, and Benny followed suit with a nervous chuckle of his own. "Your new employee, however, he has a nice strong jaw and broad shoulders. Not as much meat, though." He looked me over, and I was confused and terrified at the implication of whatever it was he was talking about. As he was eyeing me, Benny spoke up saying, "Of course, you are free to pick as you please, but if I could suggest an option. We just picked up a rather unruly fellow who was just processed a few hours ago, and he is on the larger side. Perhaps he would be a good alternative." Of course, Benny, you and your new hire lead the way. I followed Benny in between him and Mr. Jaspin, who was behind us. We went into the back and then through keycard locked door that lead into the basement. Benny shot me an apologetic look as we descended into the basement, and I beheld what was down there for the first time. The place was very dark and freezing. I thought it might be another type of meat locker, and I was not too far off. When the light switched on, I had to stifle a gasp of shock and horror. As soon as the room was illuminated, I saw it all. We were surrounded on all sides by rows and rows of body bags. Almost all of them were full, corpses leered out of many of them, all in various states of decomposition. I thought I was going to be sick. It looked like a morgue. I realized that we had been dealing with these products the whole time. I laughed quietly to myself in despair when I realized the options were paper, plastic, and apparently body bags. I thought of the conversation of selecting a person. I also thought of the other people who had handled Code Blacks and had not been seen again, like Rob. Rob was bagged. I stood there mouth agape, trembling at the horror of the nightmare room before me. While it all unfolded in stark terror to me, Mr. Jaspin calmly perused through the inventory of corpses. He would scrutinize them, pinching a cheek here and there and giving a tut-tut or moan of disdain. He came across the body Benny had pointed out and he said, he is a big fellow, a lot of material they would love to use. Skin is a little dry in places, a touch of eczema. That is all right, though, Benny, old chum. You have a deal, I will tell Mr. She. Benny sighed in relief and started to guide me out of that nightmare dungeon. While leaving, I caught a look at Mr. Jaspin's pick and I held my hand over my mouth to avoid gasping out loud. It was the belligerent customer from earlier. A large dent on his face from when it was smashed in by security. The face had a deathly pallor and his eyes were still leering, even in death. Why in the hell was he down here in a body bag, and why did it sound like he was just purchased? My mind was grasping for rationalizations for how and why this was all happening. Suddenly, Mr. Jaspin caught my hand and proceeded to place a card into my palm. As for you, my fine friend, we would love to have a worker like you at our establishment. Shai runs a tight ship here, but we are a bit more free-spirited at the tailor. Take care, and he departed with his horrific purchase. I was ushered upstairs in a daze, and I vaguely heard Benny talking with someone. I snapped back to my senses and saw a new face looking at me. He was an older man, and he had very intense, unblinking eyes that were boring into my soul as I stood there. He spoke to me in a stern but oddly soothing voice. I know you might be unsettled by what you saw, but Shainu and the means to access it are natural parts of life. It is what you saw, it is what we sell. We sell it in all its forms. Why? It is even in our name. I hope you understand and do not consider anything foolish over the next few days. We value your work. But understand that some people lack the fortitude to deal with what our business does. Just don't forget that when you head back home to your house on 4th Avenue, the large cherry tree at the end of the street is blossoming and looks beautiful. You should take your daughter to see while it still blooms. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed while departing. I had no idea what I had just witnessed, but I knew I was in trouble. My mind was a jumble, and besides the imminent threat, I found myself considering something unrelated, a name. I thought about what Mr. She had said about She Knew and how we sell it. I looked again at the sign as I was leaving She's nighttime convenience and grocery. I did not think anything of it at first, but I looked closer at the kanji by the first word. Looking up the meaning on my phone, I saw it was indeed the kanji for Shisai, sometimes used when counting as the number 4 in Japanese, but more often associated with something else. The dawning horror and simplicity of the name made sense now. Sashi more often translates to death. I had worked almost an entire month at Death's nighttime convenience and grocery. I did not go back, I quit. I will find another way to make the rest of the money I need. My family's safety is what is important now, and I know it is not safe for me and Donnie here anymore. How could it be? When Mr. Death knows where you live.
The box had the power to bring people back from the dead, and it had made my dad very rich. This is going to be yours one day, so you need to listen and pay attention to everything I say and do. The box was a plain maple box with no markings, but it had a smell which was hard to describe. It smelled like something from my childhood, sweet, like cotton candy or freshly made waffles. The clients were siblings who never got to be by their father's bedside when he passed. They lived overseas, and it was too late by the time they made it back. All they wanted to do was say goodbye to him one more time, and they were willing to pay a lot to do it. For the box to work, my dad would place a recent photo, the clothes the deceased were wearing when they died, and a precious personal item into the box. We brought what you asked us to bring. They handed my father a picture of the siblings and their father, which was taken the last time they were all together before he died. They then handed him a gold watch, which they said he had since he was a young man, and never took off his hand. My dad placed the items in the box along with what he was wearing the day he died. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I could feel the beating of my heart as we stood there waiting in silence. Suddenly a tapping sound could be heard coming from the box. It knocked 3 times before my father opened the lid. The old man looked confused at first, but when he saw the smiling faces of his kids, his eyes lit up. They spent the next 2 hours alone in a room together. I watched as my dad kept a close eye on my watch. "Why do they only get 2 hours?" I asked. "It's the rules, son," my father said abruptly. My father ushered the brother and sister of the dead man from the room. They looked devastated having to say goodbye, but at least they got to finally say it. My first experience with the dead was a strange moment for me. It was terrifying, but also kind of sweet. It was seeing the faces of the grieving families light up as they got to hug their dearly departed one more time. When it comes to the death of a child, parents would empty their bank accounts for a chance to hug their child one last time. The grief-stricken couple had traveled from the other side of the world. The pain of losing their child from a freak accident was etched into their faces. "Did you bring what I asked you to?" my dad softly asked. This was his favorite toy. He never went anywhere without it, explained the woman. My dad placed all the items in the box before ushering the couple into another. Everyone waited with nervous apprehension. Suddenly, the smell of warm memories filled the room as the box started to shake. My dad walked over and took the lid of the box, and a fresh-faced, blonde-haired boy was smiling up at us. His blue eyes were bright and radiant, and he smelled like a newborn baby. "Mommy," Daddy beamed the young boy as his parents embraced him. My dad kept a close eye on his watch as we sat in the next room. "I hate this part," said my dad with a sullen look on his face. When we entered the room, the smell of a newborn baby was replaced by the stench of rotten meat. The boy's radiant blue eyes were now black as coal and his face deathly pale. "We explained the rules, Mrs. Jefferson." "It's time," my dad said, as he quickly ushered the boy's crying parents from the room. My dad left me alone in the room with the boy. I watched in horror as the boy screamed in immense pain as his bones contorted and snapped. I remembered the boy's parents telling us he died from multiple fractures when a bookcase in the family home fell on him. The boy's face contorted in agony as he began to crawl unnaturally towards me. My body went stiff with fear as his hands pulled on the end of my jeans. All I wanted to do was scream, but I couldn't make a sound. Suddenly, my dad ran into the room and pulled the dead boy off me. The whole process didn't sit right with me. Watching that poor boy squirm in agony was a sight I never wanted to see again. After the parents had left, my dad picked up the boy as he cried for his parents and carried him from the room. "What are you going to do with him?" I asked. My dad stood silent as a look of guilt radiated from his eyes. "They're dead, son. Why does it matter?" As we stopped at a large steel door, my dad turned to me with a serious expression on his face. "You have to promise one thing. When I die someday, you will never bring me back." Something didn't sit right about the whole process, and I was starting to think my dad wasn't the good person I always thought him to be. A sense of dread crept up my spine as the smell of death hit me. He handed me the keys to the door, as the dead boy in his arms continued to wail in agony. My hands were shaking with fear as I placed the key in the lock. I slowly opened the door, and the sound of agonizing screams was deafening. The room was filled with hundreds of moaning and wailing corpses, some calling out for their loved ones. "It doesn't feel right to just bury them," he said as he flung the dead boy like discarded rubbish into the pile of the living dead.